Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is the security news. Did I miss any announcements?
I wouldn't exactly say we missed them, Paul.
And try the veal. Endgame webcast is being held on August 16th this year from 3 to 4 p.m. Of course, why would it be next year, right? It's August 16th, right after Black Hat. On phishing prevention. Go to securityweekly.com/endgame and register today. Alrighty.
Yay!
Now, security news. Where do we want to start first? Now, Josh, you were talking about, we'll start with what you mentioned briefly in passing on the break, which is you thought it was interesting that Cisco, rather, has bought Duo.
Yeah, I mean, woke up this morning and saw the news. It's crazy. What do you want to say? I mean, so obviously Duo, pretty well known in the space in terms of, the two-factor side. As we were talking about earlier, passwords being the bane of a lot of people's existence. And Duo makes that a little bit easier in terms of making sure you're handling a two-factor push to the phone, or handling that in a secure way. There are a lot of options for two-factor, and so Duo is one that we see a lot of clients adopt because they like it, and it works for them. So it's interesting because obviously a change in the space.
Does Duo have a single sign-on that competes with Okta as well?
I'm
they
not
list
familiar
Okta
with that.
as their primary competition on a website is called Owler. I always thought Okta could partner with other people to implement the two-factor piece of it, and Okta was your single sign-on solution. Although Okta rather is a really big, and they're a public company now. Their revenue is like $280 million. I'll try not to drag you into the whole numbers behind it. We have different shows for that. But my concern, one of my concerns, which I'm happy for Duo and Dong Song and the whole team over there. We know many people that work for Duo. My concern is what are they going to change the name to, right? Because they took a really cool name like SourceFire, and then they called it Firepower. Isn't that what it's called now? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Firepower now?
Don't know.
It was a terrible name change in my
Whatever
opinion.
it is, the branding didn't work because we don't know what it is.
Yeah, and there you have it.
Don't know what it is, but
I'm
we can
pretty
tell
sure
you. We can still tell you that open source snort.
Someone's yelling it. Someone's yelling in their car, yelling at me right now if I got it wrong.
Or at work yelling at us.
Or yelling if we got it right. And
but clearly,
telling us to stop wondering if we got it right or wrong.
Clearly, the marketing doesn't.
I hear someone Googling. I can hear the Googling happening right now.
Jeff, we got Jeff on the Google.
Okay, Jeff's on the Google.
No,
Anyway.
I'm not Googling. I'm actually talking to Gattaca because he only went to work for Duo maybe a month ago.
There you go.
What we need is someone that works for Firepower or SourceFire, whatever they call that now.
Firepower!
And
Stop
something
saying
like that.
Paul.
Anyway,
the question
I
is,
think Firepower uses 5mm rounds.
half-centimeter rounds, right? Yeah, good.
True story. We're bringing this all around. There we go.
That concludes the naming segment. Jeff just sealed the deal on the naming
seriously,
thing. So,
my concern is because Cisco has been acquiring cool security companies for over 20 years. I think one of their first acquisitions back in the late 90s was the Wheel Group. And I knew a bunch of people that worked for the Wheel Group, and they were ex-military, ex-Air Force, did some really cool stuff, first to market on a lot of stuff that we do these days, or did then. And the trend back then was, for these larger companies to buy up a smaller company for the technology, and even though the technology had a cool consulting arm and had cool people, doing lots of different things. They pretty much got bought for the technology, and everybody else was just kind of, who are you? What are you doing here? Go away. So while I'm not worried that any of the people that we know that are sort of doing cool stuff for Duo aren't either going to be happy where they end up with Cisco or end up somewhere else. I could see it being a little bit
contentious,
unnerving, or a little bit of upheaval for, especially like Gattaca. He's only been there. I swear it's only been like a month.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing, Jeff. Like, I think we in technology, not just security, have this perception of Cisco and CA both as larger companies that buy smaller companies, and that's where smaller companies go to die.
Yes.
And I think that that's been the stigma for some time. However, I think the pendulum has swung in the other direction, and I don't think that's where technologies go to die. I don't think these large companies can afford to acquire technology and let it die. Like, they just can't. They have to do something with it. I think SourceFire was probably the beginning of that trend.
Paul, you ignorant slut. I disagree. Well, I agree with you up to a certain point, but it's happened many times in this industry during the last 25 years where cool technologies have been acquired. I mean, we're just freaking joking about SourceFire, and we don't even know what it's called now.
I was just picking on the name.
Well, yeah, but
I don't know what
how many technologies can we think of that have been acquired by larger companies, and they've either gone away altogether, they've been assimilated. I mean, there's been times where cool technologies have been bought, quite literally just to kill the competition.
Yep. Yes.
I mean, and I'm not saying that's what's happening here.
Well, that happened, but I mean, outside of security, that was like with Slack and HipChat and all of that, where they purchased HipChat to kill it.
Yes, and certainly that's a trend.
That's not security specific, but
I don't think in a lot of cases in security, I think there's a good amount of investment to be made, and especially in larger companies that want to acquire that cool technology. And sure, they might leave the names, but that technology gets integrated into their systems. So, I mean, Veracode, Jeff, to your point, you ignorant slut, is a very shining example of a larger company.
Do you even know what that reference is, Paul, you youngster?
Yes, I do. It's from some
it is?
movie or TV show. I can't remember which, but it's a reference to some movie or TV show. You don't know what it is.
Larry, tell them what it is.
It is Rocky Horror Picture Show, isn't it?
It's Saturday Night Live. Weekend Update.
Oh, yes.
Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin. Jane, you ignorant slut.
Yep, that's a little before my time.
A little segment called Point Counterpoint. Sorry, I'm old.
You are. So one of the things
I've got cool historical swag.
That's concerning to me with the Cisco acquisition of Duo is that I look at some of Cisco's track record, and just track record in the last 6 or 7 years.
Yes.
In that,
I'm sure there's a graph of what's occurred.
Yeah. Well, from my experience, was very much Cisco had bought a bunch of security products, and they had this really great desktop security product that they said, yeah, you know what? We've divested ourselves too much. We're a networking company, and we're just going to drop all of our security stuff. And they became a networking company again. That was six years ago.
But then remember, they had a big layoff, and they said, "Oh shit, we're missing the boat.
Yeah,
we got to do security in the cloud company first, because we're going to die like an old. We're going to be the dinosaur of the industry if we don't change." And that's my point. That's what I think.
What's going to happen? They're going to go, "Oh shit, we're divesting ourselves too much. We got to get rid of something. Let's get rid of this networking crap."
They paid $2 billion for a company like Duo, to just let it die. Right. I don't think they're going to just let it die. They're not going to just walk away from it.
They're not killing it on purpose. They're integrating it with ICE, and I think it's a solid integration.
Yeah. Right. Now that was exactly one of the products that their desktop thing that they integrated with ICE, but it was 2 years before any of that happened. Before they said we're going to dump
these things take time before they're integrated.
But large organizations do not move fast.
But it was literally no. We're not going to spend the next 2 years of not doing upgrades and integrate it over a 2-year period. It was we're dropping this. And 2 years later, it shows up in ICE. So they had the best of breed. They had the best in market endpoint protection at the time, and they said, "We're out." 2 years later, they show up with it integrated, and they're way behind.
Yeah. Well, and now they're catching up. I'm hearing ICE brought up a lot more in enterprise discussions. So I think that was just a company positioning on Cisco's part that went horribly wrong, and they've turned it around. And I guess that's my point. I think CA largely has turned it around as well in their security acquisitions as well. Verico being the shining example there. So anyway, we do a whole show that covers a couple different shows. Business Security Weekly and Enterprise Security Weekly, where we'll be talking about this a lot more. Personally, I'm happy for the people at Duo. They get great technology. There's great people that work there. I think it's a good move for them all around, certainly. Congratulations. And I mean, the other thing I was saying,
great job all around by their team. I mean, they've done good work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the reward and the payoff is there. My only concern, having known people that have gone through a Cisco acquisition for the last 20 years, is the fun and everything, you're doing great for one company, all of a sudden the focus is different and the agenda is different when you go to work for the larger company. But the paycheck and the payout, might be a pretty good salve for whatever wounds that they experience.
Take your money and run.
Yep.
When you can. Typically it depends on your position in the company. Usually the higher ups have to stay on for some period of time.
I'm sure there'll be a good party at Black Hat.
Yes.
Was Duo having a party at Black Hat? I think so, probably. If not, they are now.
Yale University discloses an old school data breach. And by old school, I don't mean an old school style of attack. I mean it's an old data breach. There was I don't remember who was commenting on this, but there was a comment in the story. Basically, Yale was compromised back in 2008, 2009. And it says something in the article like in 2010, they did some kind of like upgrade of the system and didn't notice that it had 2011 that it had been hacked. And then fast forward to today, and they realized that it has been hacked and students' personal information was leaked. But there's a quote in the article that says, back in 2008/2009, very few companies were aware of such a cyber threat, nor were they taking the necessary precautions. Huh? What? Was that misquoted somehow, or did someone really say that? You put that stuff in an article, and we're forced to call it out at that point. But no one was paying attention to security in 2008 or 2009.
Think about what cyber security looked like. Oh God, drink.
You said cyber.
Think about what it looked like in 2008, 2009 when we started doing this podcast.
No, it was 2005.
All right, think about it. What it looked like 3 years after we started this podcast.
2008,
exactly the same.
2009, the Gonzalez.
What were we talking about?
Breaches had happened.
Passwords,
Wi-Fi, covert channels using RF communications.
I mean, we weren't talking about WAFs because those weren't a thing back then.
No, they might have been.
They were.
They were.
Until they got bought up by all the big companies. There were some
PCI requirements and such.
I do want to clarify the Signal Sciences does tout themselves as the next generation WAF, but it's not like it's not your granddad's WAF. Like it is not.
I think what's intriguing about this article is how so many years later they, not only that they reported it, but how did they figure it out that it happened way back when?
Well, part of the article says somewhere between March 2016 and June 2018, which is a pretty large window, the database was once again accessed by an unknown threat actor who was able to steal the names and social security numbers of 33.
Oh, so it's not an old breach.
They were able to steal the names and social security numbers of 33 individuals.
Oh, because they said that they weren't collecting the information anymore after a certain time. Like they were collecting in 2008 and 2009. Then there were some data governance regulations that were passed, and they're like, no, we're not going to collect and store. Or they were collecting it but not storing it, so they deleted all but the database, and we're like, we need to collect it for like a short period of time, and then we can delete it. And then the attackers must have gotten back in and said, hey, there's only 33 here. What the heck?
All right. But reality check. Go up a sentence or a paragraph. It wasn't until June 16th this year that a routine check of servers and systems uncovered evidence of a data breach. So 2018, they're finding evidence on systems of a breach that happened 10 years ago.
Those
You know,
are
what
some
leap
those are some pretty robust systems that have survived for that long.
That's a great observation. Jeff.
Or old unsupported systems.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And
Or attackers doing some backup that is just like left in like a exfil.zip type thing.
or two.
I stored my persistence
I
in the
don't know.
database,
Yeah.
and every time they copied the database, it went with
Well,
it. I mean,
we
that'd be
can
pretty
all
awesome.
agree that the password hasn't changed.
Two, they hired a new guy that's doing a new level of due diligence during those routine checks.
No, I think Jeff hit the nail on the head.
Yeah,
they
the password
didn't change
doesn't
the password. Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't change the password.
But then why
All
all
right,
of a sudden? But if they're doing routine
that
checks,
closes it right there.
if they're doing routine checks, why didn't they detect it any other time?
Larry, stop,
And go
Larry.
full circle.
We're
They
moving
should have had
forward.
Duo on there.
Move on.
There you go.
Let's move on.
Totally.
If only they had firepower. That would
So, or WAF. So, 5 steps to fight unauthorized crypto mining. Now, I have to admit, I read the headline and nothing more, and my initial thought was this article is going to be totally lame. So I went into it with really low expectations, thinking this is going to be really lame. I mean, no offense to the author or anything. Like I said, I didn't know who the author was. I didn't read the article yet. I had preconceived notions that this was going to be lame. However, I did find 2 of the 5 points that I thought were very, very good. The other 3 are kind of so-so. But the first one that I thought was interesting was avoid unauthenticated platforms and application programming interfaces or APIs, or as Doug White says, APIs. It's APIs, Doug. I think that that's one of the more misunderstood terms. Like, hey, what's the security of your API? Like, isn't this API security threat a thing? Like, I'm like, I'm always, when I talk to enterprise, I'm always like, all right, hold on, let's back up.
Well, it
Is
depends
this-
whether they've done DevOps or Sec DevOps.
Nope, not even before we get there. Like, what's your
That
concern?
wasn't even a thing. That was
like with an API, is it an API you're running in your own application? Are you interfacing between 2 APIs, like in applications on your own network? Are you integrating
third
cloud-based
parties,
third party, like an API from Facebook? Or and like what is your concern? Is it you're taking in some other software and then integrating via its API, and you're worried about the communication?
What's the threat model? What does this thing look like?
We
What does
gotta-
the architecture look like?
Right.
What does it play like? Does it
I don't
receive
like when they
data
just say
from
API security, because I'm like, are you running your own API and you want to know the best way to write an API so that it's secure is very different from how do I interface securely with someone else's API versus
But if
how
the
do I make sure
architecture-
their API is secure?
if the architecture is built in such a way that you have certain assumptions, then it's secure for that and that alone. When those assumptions change, then you have to go back to the drawing board in a lot of the reconfigurations.
So it depends
and/or
largely on
securing,
the use case.
securing it to what end,
Yes.
and what are you
And the
dependencies?
one of the OWASP standards actually talks about API security. The what is it? The WSV.
So there's the OWASP, the ASVS, which is the
ASVS.
Application Security Verification Standard.
Yes,
That is a thing, and
it's an awesome thing. It's an
people
awesome
can look
thing.
at that and
There's a whole section
check your
on
applications
API
using
security.
that.
Yes.
And that's definitely a good framework. We
Now,
use
is
it a lot
that a
for
good
pen testing.
framework, Josh, for if I'm building my own API and or I'm using someone else's API and evaluating the security of someone else's API? What's the use case for the
Sure.
OWASP? What was it? I can't remember the acronym.
Application Security Verification Standard.
Okay.
Basically what it does is for a web application, any application, whether it's an API, mobile app, most of the time web app, but it doesn't matter. It says we've tested the application with this level of rigor.
Right.
And so it uses a tiered approach. Here's a level 1, level 2, level 3. And so if you look at a level 1, we're going to look at some of these basics, the most obvious types of badness, SQL injections, et cetera, et cetera. Can we gain unauthorized code execution on the system? Those are the most common types of things.
It's more for like I've written my own app and I want to make sure that when we're testing it, we cover all of our bases.
Yeah, and so when you do that type of a test, you're looking at like, all right, level 1, level 2, level 3, and you get into the more advanced. You're looking at like, the back end, the logs, what type of data is stored there, cryptographic, all of the more interesting types of things. You're looking at the business context, the application, and where do all these pieces tie in together. It's useful for APIs. It's useful for web services. It's useful for web applications, mobile, across the board.
APIs is usually where people have the question today because they're just in either direction in use case. There's underpinning our kind of feature that applications are using to talk to each other. So,
exactly. So like web services, I presented that on Black Hat. many years ago, looking at like WSDLs and SOAP and all the craziness.
Well,
that
it was
can go
SOAP,
on
and
there.
then it was XML RPC,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
now it's JSON.
yeah.
It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. So APIs are no different, and that doesn't really relate to the DevOps, SecOps stuff, because it's those have been around for a long time, and so you need to make sure that those are being built in a secure way. You're making your assumptions, and then you're validating those assumptions using a framework and an approach that makes sense.
Now, it's interesting how they talk about this in the light of fighting unauthorized crypto mining, in that your unauthenticated platforms and APIs, if they're unauthenticated, could lead to issues. It's interesting they brought up the example of the Docker API. If you leave that open without authentication, people can upload Docker containers and do DDoSes and mine cryptocurrency. Yep. Which happened to us. It was a DDoS case with us, but it's a very easy thing to miss today, especially as you deploy more applications. Every single application you deploy has an API, and it's yet one more thing we have to think about. Which is why I liked it on this list. The other thing was keep your cloud credentials out of the public side of GitHub, which I think is a little too specific. I think you need to watch out for how you manage your credentials that are authenticating your applications, or any credential that could be in an application that gets published somewhere, whether it be GitHub or Docker Hub or any other system.
Tokens, sessions, all that stuff, SSH keys, all of those things.
API keys.
Yeah, API keys or tokens or any sort of or two-factor backups. A lot of those pieces, or you have a service account credential. It gets around
like for
some of these pieces.
The two-factor for DigitalOcean gives you a bunch of backup codes.
Right.
Those backup codes are the same thing, are part of your
those are the thing.
Yes.
So you should treat them as such, and so making sure that those are secured and
when you copy and paste those,
put them in a safe, and
Oh, I just copy and paste them, and then I put them in my GitHub repository.
There you go. Yeah.
I put them on my.
You always have access to them.
Absolutely.
My S3 drive.
Or just
make it public.
Just put them on Pastebin, and you'll have
they don't always have access to
like
it.
Passwords
from anywhere.
If you're gonna keep them in a file somewhere, or on a sticky note, it doesn't really matter how long it is.
It's true.
Yeah, people always make fun of those password books, but if that password book's in a safe, then
No, I think.
Well, I'm old school. Write it down.
There you go.
In a notebook, lock it in a safe. Don't use a password vault. But I know
that is your password vault. It's a vault with your password.
A physical vault.
Sure.
It's a physical vault.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's where you should keep your domain credentials, because nobody should be using the domain accounts unless there's some sort of in case of fire, break glass, use it. Everything should be on a lower level. But to Josh's earlier point, even lower level, privileged accounts, you can do stuff with them. So
absolutely, like Kerberos.
Yep.
So there you go.
One thing that I think is
Kevin.
worth mentioning in this list, although it's geared much more towards the enterprise, but it still would be applicable, is to use an ad blocker.
I really thought you were going to say use a WAF, Kevin. Like I really thought you were just leading us into it.
I'm going for the long con joke. You ruined it. It's going to kind of go into the ad blockers and then end with a WAF. No, but if you look at most browser-based crypto, which is really what's kind of exploding now, crypto mining, crypto means cryptography, an ad blocker will do a really great job, particularly for the last example on here is monitor your Windows Task Manager for CPU utilization. Well, you can prevent a lot of that if your infection or your vector is the browser. So using, even across an enterprise, an ad blocker, I think, is key to just get a lot of the crap out of there.
I absolutely 100% agree, and it's one of the tactics that I've employed to attempt to keep us safe here at Security Weekly, because we're a small organization. We don't really, we are the IT staff as well as the rest of the staff as well, pretty much. Like there's no dedicated IT staff, so we all have to be IT, and I recently just cut over our DNS servers just to host them in somewhere different, because I was using the Pi-hole solution that I presented as a technical segment, and I don't run that on a Raspberry Pi. I run that on droplets or virtual infrastructure in the cloud. So I actually just killed my DigitalOcean account because they needed to be updated. So what I did was I rebuilt them on another hosting provider that had a $5 a month. Linode has a $5 a month option. Since it's made to run on a Raspberry Pi, I can do the $5 a month option. It was $10 a month for DigitalOcean. There's a joke in there about centimeters. Anyway, so I have them both on the Node now, latest version, all running. I cut the Office over, and what it does is, on a DNS level, does the blacklist blocking, automatically updates, pulls from open source blacklists, and I find it to be really effective. I think it's probably a little aggressive. I mean, you can do the same thing with OpenDNS, probably a little, better control for non-nerdy kind of users, but I think it's a little aggressive. But like, I'd rather have it be a little aggressive, and users know how to bypass it, and that's fine if they need to get around it and then go back for normal everyday browsing. That way, as Kevin's saying, when you load an ad that might try and do these crypto mining, or their end result is a crypto mining attack, you're protected on the DNS level, and I think that's a good.
There's a great lesson with what you're talking about. You had one provider, you wanted to switch to another provider, you had a script to do the installation, and that switch was easy because you updated the script, and then you can just switch vendors or switch instances.
Absolutely.
And if that's quick and easy to do, then that's where a lot of people need to move.
And I've reviewed some of the code, admittedly not all of it, but they've got a one command install, turns it into a Pi-hole.
Exactly.
So
if you have a script and you have an instance in whatever cloud provider you're using and you want to switch cloud providers, it's easy to do, and you can spin up a new instance and just move it over and do that. I read an article about that's sort of the same approach that Google has in terms of they're basically saying, okay, it's easy to add or just blow this system away because it's not working properly, or, or hardware degradation or whatever, and we can just switch it out and just move on to the next one.
Ideally, you've got an instance on the Node, you've got an instance on Google Cloud, and
we just have DNS and whatever,
DNS
and
is spread about all these 4 different cloud providers, and we're good to go. I may actually do that. That's actually a good excuse for me to have a little hands-on time with some of the different cloud providers.
Play with your cloud providers. Have a good old time.
Absolutely. It's awesome.
Just bring it to the edge with Microsoft Edge.
Had a vulnerability of some kind. Did I put that in there?
You did, number 1.
Yeah.
And it made me think of the production crew.
Pwn them bones.
With Microsoft Edge and EdgeCon 2019.
Oh, wow. That's official, huh?
Apparently.
Don't ask about it, please, audience. Don't. Just forget you ever heard that. So I don't know what this flaw was. I actually didn't review the story in any detail. It
was just about the edging.
That speak for I didn't read it. But saw there was a flaw in Microsoft Edge. And I know that it caught my attention because they just updated or changed their cross-site scripting policy in Microsoft Edge. There was something that happened with their cross-site scripting policy, and now this vulnerability appears. Oh, and look at that. It was discovered by NetSparker, security researcher whose name I'm going to butcher. Zion Albanese is found a vulnerability in the same origin policy of the browser, which seems to be a pretty popular feature to circumvent in browsers.
Yeah, I mean that's just an area where you've had multiple bypasses for some time, and that's just a hard one for the browsers to get right. So that's a tough one.
Yep, for sure. Anyway, that was the Edge one. I wasn't going there, Larry. You took me there.
I took you right to the edge.
You took me right to the Microsoft Edge. So Reddit has disclosed a data breach that was described, and we talked about Duo and two-factor authentication, and how awesome two-factor authentication is, pretty much except when it's SMS. And we've covered at least 2 other stories. A couple of weeks ago, we covered a user that had a 3-letter Twitter handle that was so valuable that the attackers spent the time, social engineered T-Mobile, got her number switched to their SIM card, and then used that to reset the password to her email, and we're off to the races, and basically ransom, it's kind of a low-tech ransomware attack on her Twitter handle until they turned it over. They were going to ransom her. I don't know what the end result was of that story, but it also, speaking of how lame SMS two-factor authentication is, there's a quote from, I think it was a representative from Reddit that said, already having access, or our primary access point for coding infrastructure behind strong authentication requiring two-factor authentication, we learned that SMS-based authentication is not nearly as secure as we would hope, and the main attack was via an SMS intercept. I don't know if
But
typically those intercepts are, I've social engineered your provider, which is why today in many providers you have a PIN. If you're going to change the SIM card that your number's associated with, that's one of the activities that like you need to set up a PIN.
Yep.
It's definitely something everyone should do because of how trivial and how often we're seeing attacks like this. But at the same time, you imagine in a scenario, you call a call center, someone's overworked. They may not verify that. They may be pressured into doing this, which is why I think we see such a high success rate. All it takes is one person to bypass, even a control like that. This story in itself set off kind of a spat about two-factor being SMS or push or other types of technologies.
Yep.
In that SMS has its flaws, but it's still better than nothing. And I mean, going back to the earlier conversations about passwords, at least it's a second verification. It may not be authentication, but it is a step. It still takes someone targeted. If you're caught up in a larger thing where your credentials are stolen, at least you have something that
I don't see it as much as a better than nothing as it is. It's more of the illusion of security. Everybody, including NIST, has said SMS authentication is weak, but it looks like you're doing something cool. And when you're a consumer and you've got your mobile device and it's like, oh, that's really cool. I've got that number. I can type it in. To me, it's more the illusion of security, and I
don't think anyone's disagreeing with that. No. If I was provided the choice between just password-based authentication or password-based plus SMS, which you'll see with a lot of major websites is the only second factor they offer.
Yep.
I'm probably going to opt for the latter because at least it gives me something knowing how little I trust just a username and a password.
Right.
And it makes the attacker go through more steps.
Right. And I argue, what is the illusion for the lack of security? Because if I think about what it takes to intercept SMS, it's one either incredibly technical where you're having to deploy your own cellular base station.
MC catcher, right.
Your cellular base station to be able to man in the middle of the traffic, to recover those SMS messages. That's almost nation-state level work or expensive work at that
expensive stuff.
Detector.
Yeah.
Or you're social engineering the call center at T-Mobile, wherever
your provider is.
And that
is more doable.
That is more doable. Much more doable, but it still takes a lot of
barrier to
balls.
entry in terms of like making the call is cheap for the attacker because you can call multiple times.
Sure.
If you get it wrong and nothing happens, but if you get it right, then you win.
Right.
So the way maybe you can frame this is, if you have SMS based off, you're not going to necessarily, not to say it's not always going to happen, but you won't be caught up in an automated attack. If a database breach happens and your passwords and credentials are released and that's automated and weaponized, someone's going to log in automatically. You have SMS, at least there's something that would prevent that and require an attacker to expend a little bit more. You'd have to be targeted at that point. And that's at least something. That's got to be worth something.
Agreed.
Jeff?
Yeah, and now Kevin's touching on what I think is the most important element, and it's sort of the 800-pound gorilla in our whole industry. Larry has described it as nation-state level of attacks. I usually refer to it as target attacks. There's the real bad guys out there that are really doing attacks that lead to breaches, that lead to compromises and real data losses. They're not that really smart. They're doing what's easy. They're doing what's simple relatively. They're doing stuff that they can monetize, and they don't really care who they do it against. The Target breach, for example. I don't think Target was targeted. I think Target happened to be vulnerable to something that the attackers saw that they could exploit. In terms of like a nation-state level attack, we throw that out, I think, as, well, who can defend against a nation-state attack? Nobody can invest enough in a nation-state attack. And while I agree with that at one level, there's also that's also a straw man argument, I think, that but it underscores the sort of the 800-pound gorilla of our industry. There's a huge difference between what we're describing as it's easy, it's relatively cheap in order to implement this attack, versus if you really want to target some specific company, organization, entity, and you're willing to invest in it, there's any number of ways you can do it.
So I'm going to go ahead and say a couple pieces, because you mentioned a lot of stuff there. I think that there's a huge difference from my perspective between NSA level skill to do something and the guys that hacked Target. And I think that, in the PCI breaches and, et cetera, the Home Depots and all of that stuff, even the data dumps.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed. Yep.
There should be no comparison between the two. Like NSA level skill, arguably, the highest level of skill in terms of, what's out there, North Korea, less skill.
Complexity cost.
Complexity cost, resources budget, being able to say.
Where does the TJX breach fall? That was one of the first major.
Yeah, I mean, that was a long time ago.
It was still low
Yeah.
level. It's in the target. It's in the target.
I'd say even lower. I'd say even lower.
It certainly wasn't nation state.
Yeah, I think that one's even lower.
That's lower. That's like something my
it got
mom
pressed
could do.
because it was one of the first big breaches.
It was one of the first and arguably one of the largest.
Yeah.
But I mean, from my perspective, when I think about the different groupings of adversaries and then, targeting or not targeting, if you have, a group that targets an organization or, they're targeting credit card numbers, completely different motivation than you're a country like China or the NSA or Russia or North Korea, and you're going after a potential target that has political or motivated by not just dollar, or maybe it is motivated by dollars in maybe in North Korea's case, but most of the time motivated by things outside of the realm of we just want the number of records to be the highest.
Right.
And or if you're targeting an individual, I'm going after this particular individual because maybe they're a celebrity or they're whatever. That's a different type of attack. But I do think that there's a huge distinction to be made, and it should be 100% clear that, if we're just going after number of records, whether it's credit cards or whatever, versus an APT or an advanced threat, I think that there is a huge difference, and that distinction should be.
So my counterpoint.
And I will have a question, but Jeff, I'll let you counterpoint.
Okay, so the counterpoint is what I'm trying to say is, there is certainly a nation state versus nation state level of cybersecurity going on, and that's played out in ways that us in the private sector, we can hypothesize, and maybe we know some people and we know a little bit about what's going on, and I sort of loosely classify that as kind of the real kind of stuff going on. But then there's this level in the private sector, in the commercial world, where companies like Target or TJX that we're mentioning, most of them are going to say, either they're going to say, well, we couldn't defend because it was a nation state level attack. Who can afford to defend against something like that? And really, arguably, why should they? Some of them have. There's a big difference. Well, let me finish. There's a big difference between, sort of doing the due diligence and doing the things to catch or prevent or detect the typical bad guy that's not necessarily sophisticated, but just looking for targets of opportunity because they know how to exploit a certain thing, versus somebody that's really going after you. To me, that's a big sort of thing that we don't ever talk about in this industry. Go ahead.
So for me, what we do when we look at the target profile for the organization, we're going back to the NIST CSF, mapping out the organization. What vertical are they in? Is it oil and gas, manufacturing?
And I'm going to stop you real quick, because that was going to be my question: is what was the motivation for attacking Reddit? Let's frame this with that. Sure.
That's a great question.
So I don't have the answer to that particular question, but
we can spitball that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that for some clients, their threat profile is such that they are concerned with an APT style threat, and I haven't dug too much into the Reddit side of the article, but some organizations they care the most about protecting against a North Korea, a China, a Russia style organization and getting broken into by them, versus others that are just like, I just want to keep my credit cards
also taking
safe.
into consideration the motivation of the nation state to hack into a particular target. That's varied. I think that's the variable that we might be missing in this whole conversation is that, yes, it might be I want to be really stealthy to spy or to steal things to gain intellectual property or to gain intelligence about the enemy, right? Or I might just be hacking.
It's varied, Paul, but it's not new. The motivations have not changed from
Jeff.
Time immemorial.
Well, so the other example is a misinformation campaign or just to make the enemy look bad. Like, I'm going to hack into all the financials in the U.S., cause them some distress to disrupt the markets, to make a statement, to...
Hell, we break in, we don't do anything, but when it gets public, that we lose confidence in the market.
Right, or the election, right? I mean, that could be viewed in a number of different...
Or a newspaper, or a variety of other things.
Yep.
F-35 stuff with stealing intellectual property.
But to Jeff's point too, I mean, this is
Reddit or Reddit, an option where you can exercise your First Amendment rights and talk about politics and have surreptitious posts by people that are known in these.
But to Jeff's point, this stuff. I mean, this is the same techniques that have been used before we had computers, right? I mean, the nation states had the same agenda.
But motivation.
Yes,
I mean,
yes, correct.
When I first started in the last couple of years, when I went to work for Tenable, and they had me go out and start doing public speaking, one of the first talks I gave was and it was shortly after the Target breach, and I was really actually doing some soul searching. I've been in this business a long time, and this kind of major breach happens to a company that everybody in the industry thinks is doing the right things, and even they get hacked. And I'm like, how well are we doing to really secure companies? And the talk that I developed, what it ended up being was a reflection of the state of security, over the last 20 years. I happened to give it in San Antonio, and I had gone to San Antonio 20 years ago, 20 years prior, almost to the week, which is where I sort of got started in this whole, internet cybersecurity thing. And what I ended up doing was giving a presentation that was a presentation that I had given back in the 90s. And one of the slides was, and I can pull it up and we can put it in the show notes later. What are the motivations of the hackers, of the attackers? And that and a lot of other slides, and I had the whole audience saying, I'm saying, this is the problem in the industry today, and everybody's, I'm watching the audience nodding their head, and like I got a whole lot of buy-in, and then my big reveal was, oh, by the way, this presentation is nearly 20 years old. Nothing has changed, nothing is different, and you can go back, decades, if not hundreds of years, on the motivations of why. It's the whole thing. What we have in the media today is this whole thing about fake news. Back in the Cold War days, we used to just call it propaganda.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
It's the same thing. I mean, was it last week we were talking about it? And the assured mutual destruction was the deterrence, where you have world powers not blowing each other up. So you have the same thing, perhaps, hypothetically, this mutual assured destruction, why world powers, nation states aren't, destroying the grid, taking down critical infrastructure, and so on and so forth.
It's the same problem. The delivery method's different.
Yes. Nicely summed up, Larry. HP starts a bug bounty program for printers.
Yeah, and Jeff, I saw your message on Twitter, and this was really interesting. And I think it ties to my story, is that HP has started a bug bounty program. And who was the bug bounty delivery that Bugcrowd?
HackerOne?
Yep, Bugcrowd.
HackerOne?
Bugcrowd. Bugcrowd. Wasn't that who Keith used to work for?
HackerOne?
Bugcrowd. No, it was through Bugcrowd. And they've partnered with Bugcrowd to deliver this bug bounty program. The problem is I couldn't find anywhere that linked to where the actual bug bounty program was, and I went to Bugcrowd's website, and I couldn't find the actual program. Because it's on HackerOne. Because the program. No, it's not on HackerOne. It's at Bugcrowd. But Jeff had an interesting comment to me.
Yeah, so I have been, year and a half ago, HP approached Security Weekly. They wanted to have a security day showcase, and they wanted Security Weekly to be a part of it. And I was available and willing to travel, so I went out and did it as what they call an influencer. And we were presented with a day-long series of briefings about here's all the cool things that HP is doing in terms of printer security and trying to, tackle the problem of how do you secure printers. I wrote a blog or two. I think it's still on our Security Weekly website.
Well, that's if the link still works after my upgrade.
If the link still works.
Free T-shirts.
That's that. The corrected URL will be added to the show notes after Paul figures out what the hell he's doing. But so they approached me a couple months ago saying, hey, we would like to engage you again for Black Hat. And in negotiations, one of the things that they said sort of under NDA was, our big reveal during Black Hat next week is that we're going to start a bug bounty program, which was one of the things that we had talked about a year and a half ago when we had the security, sort of showcase day. And we were talking about all, it's really cool what they're doing, yada, yada, yada. But, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in terms of, insecurities and vulnerabilities with printers and other things. And, somewhere in the conversation, we talked about, why don't you guys do a bug bounty program? And lo and behold, they actually listened to us and they're implementing it. So I don't have a lot of details because I'm waiting to hear the announcement next week of Black Hat. But apparently, I don't know whether it was revealed, published, or leaked, or whether they did an embargoed release and somebody put it out anyway.
There was a bunch.
There was a bunch.
There's a bunch of different places, and Jeff, I think this back conversation to that is a great understanding as to why I can't find an actual link to a live program, is because they're waiting to make it go live at Black Hat.
Correct.
They're getting the pre-buzz that
They probably had there was a conversation with a PR company or two that was like, hey, we should put this on the wire, get it out there to generate some buzz about it.
Quick question: Does it include the new printers, or is it the old printers, or what does it actually include inside? It's probably not even.
They don't say yet.
Yeah. No.
We won't know that until it gets posted to BugCrowd site.
The article does mention a few different classes.
Eligible printers include HP's Enterprise class line of HP PageWide, HP Color LaserJet, and several model MFPs, both A3 and A4 formats.
Don't have any of those in my house. That I know.
Either.
Yeah.
So here's my point on this story. Hold on, Jeff. This is my point on it, and I don't want to pick on HP. However, my feeling is, in my opinion, is that in this case, for a bug bounty, a public bug bounty program for HP for printers is probably not the best style of program because, as Josh says, I don't have one of those in my house. How do I get one of these? Now you're limited to
Showdown.
How do I? Yeah. So you're limited to finding someone else's printer on the internet, which I'm not a lawyer. I did watch Law and Order once, and it's probably a CFAA violation of some kind to do that.
They'll send one to my house.
Yeah,
for free.
Yeah.
Or I'm looking at the firmware. If you've ever looked at some of the HP printer firmware, I mean, it's mixed success. Like some of it, you can use some tried and true firmware analysis methods. Some of it is using PJL to, move it back and forth from the printer and have the metadata in PJL. And in which case, I'm like, I'm not that dedicated to this cause right now.
But isn't the actual
the payouts are between $500 and $10,000?
Is the code not open source?
No.
That they
no, they're printer firmware. You'd have to get reverse engineering. Yeah. So my suggestion to make this better is to make it a private bug bounty where I don't know that you'd necessarily share the source code in a bug bounty program, but maybe give them access to tools to let them have access to proprietary tools. They can gain insights into the firmware, or even better, give them access to the actual printers in a private lab. And making it a private bug bounty, in my opinion, a private program is better suited to this case because it's a printer. Where do I get an enterprise printer? Like, do I gotta borrow one? Like, what if I brick it? Also, like, that could be bad. Like at HP, I mean, they probably could fix that, right? Pretty easy. They can order a new board for it, right? If it gets bricked, and it costs them,
but it's still a cost.
$1.73 from China.
Yeah.
Well, I think what's important to point out is that the whole HP print security movement or program is predicated on enterprise level securities. I mean, they, like many vendors in our space, are focused on the enterprise. And we had discussions about this type of thing last year when we were having this security awareness day. The focus was on the enterprise, but there's HP printers and how many households across America, if not the whole world, and essentially what they were offering in terms of all the security features that they were developing were for the enterprise, and they came at a cost. And we had some pretty heated discussions in terms of, well, what about everybody else? What about the common man? What about the consumer? So it's interesting what you're saying about, when I'm hearing you say make it private, it's sort of like it's for the enterprise. It's for a subset of users anyway. My question to them a year ago, and it would still be true today, is, it's great for the enterprise that's paying for it, and I know you're a company that's trying to make money, but how do you take what you're learning and what you're doing and extend it to the more the consumer base, the ones that aren't necessarily going to pay for it, but if you've learned these valuable lessons, wouldn't you just build this in the first place to consumer oriented printers that are out there anyway?
Or what if something that was consumer grade was vulnerable to a thing, and it was also vulnerable on the enterprise side, where I could be able to test it on a consumer grade device, and it's applicable to the enterprise, going the other direction.
That's possible in certain circumstances.
Which means that if you found it in the enterprise and then you translated it back to the consumer side, but then if I tested it on the consumer side, applicable to the enterprise, that would be a reason to not go towards the private, if there was the capability for that reuse of the exploit.
I'm not sure how it works either. Like, also, so what got me thinking when I read this was, okay, I think Josh brings up a great point. Like, I can probably buy something that's really cheap, that runs similar firmware, similar protocols that I can analyze that might transfer into larger printers. So I don't have to go buy a really expensive printer. But what if an automobile manufacturer has a bug bounty? Like, what do I do? Do I go buy a car? Do I ask someone if I see that car on the road, like, hey, I'm in a bug bounty program. Can I borrow your car for a little while? Like, I promise I won't break it, right?
Rental. I mean,
do I go rent a car?
Yeah, rental.
I guess my question to you guys would be, if the choice is bug bounty program of any sort versus no bug bounty program, versus a more focused or refined private bug bounty program, however you want to craft it, versus what they're offering, which is better? I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in a different context. Is something better than nothing? Is this a step forward?
It depends on the company and what they make and what their goals are and the maturity of their.
Well, we're talking about
program.
HP and printers.
Okay, with HP and printers, I'm all in for the
pretty much what they make and how mature they are at it.
I want a private bug bounty program so that they can give a select group of people who are vetted further access into their hardware and software to make it better. Because if it's public, I think the public at hand is going to have a difficult time in testing certainly specific devices that are really expensive.
You're saying the value add that they're going to get back is going to be maximized by the private style of the bounty.
Right.
I mean, and you know what? We don't have any more details, and that may be what they're going to release at Black Hat.
Yeah, and I could see them splitting it because I like Josh's point. Like, if there are network connected printers that are
if they're not going to get it back from the public bounty,
right?
They may move to public and private.
Yep.
They could do both in theory.
I mean, if a HP printer is a couple $100, you can't set the bug bounty for $50 to find even a cross-site scripting or something like that. Just doesn't make sense. But you got to take into account that if it's going to be in the lower end devices that are $100 or less, someone can go buy those, but expect to pay more than that. So the researcher actually gets paid for that. I mean, and there is looking at the firmware, but their firmware is very different for all of their different devices.
Absolutely.
So the analysis is going to be very
And the
different.
lower cost device will have a greater usage adoption in the
Right.
world. So
Yep.
Yes.
that's
Well, let
that's
me
another
ask a
thing to
question
consider.
to Josh specifically. In your and Larry can pipe in too, but
I'm
in
out.
all of your
Kevin's
pen
out.
testing
Yeah, shut up, Paul.
experience, how often has a printer in a target network been the vehicle, the pivot point, the target for any of your pen testing activities?
so
Go ahead. Good.
Sure. So it's been there. It's not zero. It's not the most common style attack, but they're definitely valuable things, especially when you can have privileged credentials, especially associated with a domain, and those devices
Yes.
are not going to be tightly managed and or secured. And then when you have those things that are storing these credentials in a right click.
But Josh, credentials
form.
aside, like there was a framework release that allowed you to do we did a technical segment on it.
Yep.
I spent a couple days hacking the printer here in the office,
With all the
right?
PCL
Lets you
stuff.
inject things on printed, lets you
Yep.
potentially scoop up print jobs
Right.
from the printer.
So what
Did you
what
see
is-
those on pen test though?
Yes.
Probably not.
Uh-huh.
Do you?
No,
I mean,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've seen them. We've seen them sometimes, but it's what is being printed. In an example that I was working on, we got access to this printer. We looked at the content that was actually being printed.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, 'cause
Downloaded
you
it,
can basically steal
and you
it
can
as
just
the-
like steal an
It
exfil.
depends on the model. When my
That's
research,
true. That's true.
Yep.
It
yeah,
does
it
depend
had
on
to
the
be
model,
like the right model,
model,
the right
model,
version
specific
of firmware.
device,
Yeah.
and the
yes.
specific setup.
So I would argue through this. It is not a crime. It's not a targeted crime, as it were. It's a crime of opportunity.
Opportunistic.
Yes.
Yes, we
Yes.
discover a printer that's got
Yes.
default credentials,
Yes.
it's tied to all this other stuff. We get all of this other information
Yes.
because you made some poor
It
choices.
was the right
And-
model and the right version of firmware, so we could
with
steal
the
jobs
right
off it.
passwords.
Probably a nice place to install persistence and
Yes.
or steal an exfil,
Yes.
grab the data, and then you got to exfil it a different way, usually, because it's not usually
Larry's
easy.
right. We're not talking about domain. Like sometimes you need a password to access
Right.
the printer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you'd have to either guess a default or hope that they set it to something that's easy
Sometimes
to guess,
it's just
right?
default or none or
Yeah.
and
whatever.
sometimes they are tied to the domain.
Yeah.
Or it's a Joe password.
Yeah. So
Let's-
it happens.
Yeah.
If you can get access to it, it can be a juicy target. Most of the time, less useful,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Kevin.
Kevin.
I was going to say, let's not forget it being used as a part of NAC bypass.
Yep.
Looking
Yep.
at
That's
stuff
the
walls,
other
resources.
side of the coin of.
It's like you
Absolutely.
get physical access. First place I look is a printer because they generally don't support NAC. So on an authenticated port, it sounds like a great idea to me.
Yep.
So it sounds like HP needs to roll out something to prevent the NAC or NAC support for NAC, so you don't have to put them on a whitelist, and some framework to automatically or make it easy for people to update firmware. I don't know in many.
Well-
and again, there's so many different models. It's tough to say,
Yeah.
but I know for like your home-based like laser printer that have Ethernet or Wi-Fi on them, and even many of the devices you find in the enterprise today, like there's no automated firmware update, integrity checking on the firmware. There's none of those things we talk about in modern IoT devices today.
Well, let me ask you guys another question, and I'm trying to level set. If you're an organization that needs to purchase printers, presumably that's the IT department that's doing the procurement. How often, when you're considering, what printer to put in your enterprise, are you looking at the security features? What are the things are you looking at in terms of making a choice for what printers you select, whether it's HP or I don't know what all the other ones are that are out there, Canon, whoever all the other major vendors
Lexmark.
are. I don't know.
Brother.
Oh wait, no, Lexmark. Didn't
How
they get
often
big
are
bump
the
by IBM?
security features or security capabilities even considered at all, or to what degree are they considered when you're, doing a buy of a bunch of printers where you're going to put one on every floor of your
Well,
headquarters
Jeff,
building?
and that's if the IT department's even involved in the decision.
Well, yeah, and that's a question. Is it IT that's doing the procurement, or who would be procuring the printers
Well,
and plugging into the
procuring
network?
and
They're not-
integrating, or I think the way it happens, the majority of the time, I'm going on a limb here and say a department or a person in the department has a need for a printer, they go buy one on Amazon or even through their third-party reseller, or it's a real emergency, they're going to Best Buy or Target with their credit card, and they're buying a printer, and they're taking it back to the office. They're trying to get it working themselves, and then a certain percentage are calling up IT going, hey, can you help me just like finish configuring this printer? I think that's how it happens a lot.
A rogue printer.
Yes.
I disagree. It may not be IT. I'm willing to concede that, but I've been for the last couple months in assigned to a company where there's a printer in an area of a floor, and there's printers on various floors, and they're clearly managed by IT.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who procured them,
right?
But you have to have some sort of authorization to connect to it, to the printer that's like a couple cubes down from me, that's used by the whole corner of the floor type of thing. Yes, I know it's true in certain organizations that you need something, you run out to Best Buy and get it, or in the old days, Circuit City. But I think in general, enterprises, larger companies that have IT departments, they do have some sort of control over what's being dropped on the network. So there is some sort of, they play some sort of role in the procurement process.
Well,
but yeah, there's always exceptions.
A really good question to ask the listeners, and since they're the ones who are really being involved in this, how do you get printers, and do you look at the security of them?
Right.
Having seen so many printers, both in small to medium businesses and enterprises, that have the default configured state of an open access point or Bluetooth that will pair with anything that initiates a connection. I've seen it so much that it's terrifying that if you're not looking at printers for, say, open RF channels like that, you should be. And if you're making purchasing decisions, you should be assessing, do you have remote capabilities? If so, do you need them? And if not, disable them. As being able to read print jobs from the parking lot is not an ideal thing.
Yep, agreed.
I found an interesting article that is
no way
speculating. Well, the topic of the article I thought was interesting. In they're basically speculating.
Otherwise known as you didn't read it.
Is this the toothpaste in the boobs article?
Nope, it is not. It is.
Wait for it.
In the article,
wait for it, Jeff.
The demise of Adobe Flash as one of the most popular plugins on websites has shifted criminals away from exploit kits, which enable the attack vector, drive-by downloads, blah, blah, blah. They believe that the discontinuation of Flash support might eventually kill off exploit kits as a viable business model for attackers. And they've seen, they basically said, we've reduced criminals to spam, one of the least effective methods of infection.
So I have a question. What's the difference between spam and phishing?
Yeah, I think they're mixing terms there. I think they probably mean phishing as opposed to spam.
Yep. So isn't, 91% of all data breaches occur via phishing?
Yes.
Or they start with phishing, so I don't really see the difference in terms of we don't need to hit Flash because Flash is a pile. So we'll just shift it over to stealing your two-factor.
I think a lot of things either block Flash by default or just don't run Flash at all.
Yeah, your Apple devices are not going to. And
I don't agree about that this is going to kill the exploit kit, because you're just going to have exploit kits for other browser-based technologies that's not Flash.
Sure.
Because we talked about cryptocurrency mining that gets pushed by the browser. How does that get pushed? Was that Flash?
JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
JavaScript exploit pack.
The Apple phones don't even support this stuff anyway, so that's in their interests to shift away from this Flash. So that's not even a thing. Like the exploit guys, if they're targeting a phone, they're going to go the other route.
They're going to go Android.
They're going to steer your Android credentials or go after your Android exploits. Because they're going to be running like a 10-year-old thing and go that route.
Kevin.
I was going to say, it's never going to kill the browser exploit, but removing Flash, I think we can all agree, was a really good thing and probably did a serious impact on your commoditized exploit kits. If you're removing some of the major vectors, but you're also seeing the browsers really step up their game, all of them included, in actually building more secure products. I think the culmination may be, that these are going to start decreasing. And that's a great thing. It may not just be Flash. It's probably Flash plus.
It's about.
I think what they're saying is the removal of Flash from the internet has caused a decrease in the number of Flash exploit kits that are being used today.
Agreed.
That's Flash exploit kits.
Yeah.
But it won't kill the exploit kit
deep.
altogether. They'll just devote that to other technology. Is Silverlight still a thing?
Yes.
Is it?
Silverlight exploit kit. I mean,
Was that really ever a thing? It was. There was something. I haven't heard that term in a while.
Yeah.
Because you probably installed it so many moons ago and never actually got an update for it.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Well, that's pretty sad.
Hey, if we're fishing for articles to look at, let's talk about Facebook and Alex Stamos a minute.
Yeah,
Oh.
I don't know how this came in my feed. I think he has
Mentioned at
just
Stanford.
announced the move to be a faculty member at Stanford. Is
That's
that
right.
is that
He-
yeah?
I saw something that Alex Stamos was going to actually leave Facebook quite some time ago, but
Yeah, but it was
Yeah, I
happening.
mean,
it was
I think he
his-
moved over.
it was a gradual
He
transition.
took
of some
over
sort.
some
Yeah.
other-
He announced that his actual departure was this month in August.
Yeah. Right.
But we talked about it and the article that we are citing in our notes talks about the announcement being made back in March.
Yes.
2015.
So-
Yep.
It's been a long time in coming.
I think his role changed internally to the company, and then, with this new announcement, his departure to, now
We're gonna work to
teach-
get Alex on the show.
So, and earlier this week, or was it last week, Facebook got, I guess it was last week when Facebook got, smacked on the stock market, and Zuckerberg lost like $17 billion of his net worth.
Drop in the bucket, sucker.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a quarter of his net worth. He's still a multi-gazillion billionaire, but there's obviously things going on at Facebook. There's social and political ramifications, and I would love to sit down and have a beer or a stronger drink with Alex Stamos and chat with him about his experiences and what he was and was not able to do and influence in terms of Facebook.
It's also interesting timing with the elections coming up.
The midterm. Yep. And
Well,
Not to go
and-
political, but it's
and
obviously
it-
sort of
it
like
is
a political-ish
They
type.
announced that this would be his time. Like in March is when they announced and said August would be his
timeframe.
his last time frame. I think it's just coincidence that it overlapped with this other stuff, which all just spells like disaster for Facebook after the previous couple of privacy data leakage thing. I think there was another one in the news this week. Like,
Yep. They
It's bad.
the political meddling that they've removed 17 accounts, 8 groups, and 8 Instagram accounts.
they're trying now to catch up in the PR front.
Yeah.
And be like, look, we removed how many? 17? I think I had
17 accounts, 8 groups, and 8 Instagram accounts.
And again, you're going back to nation-state
Hold
level
on.
actors.
And how many users are on Facebook? Just out of curiosity. And we removed.
hundreds of millions.
Several.
I think it's well north of 500 million.
Yeah.
Alexa, how many users of Facebook are there? And whoever has
Somebody
one is
grab a
now
Google.
listening to
Yeah.
it. If you're playing the
I
podcast, here.
think it might be closer to the billion.
Billion. Yeah, I think it's a billion.
So it's a
But they
billion.
removed 17 accounts just to make you feel better.
So what you have now is an APT level threat actor, Russia, and you basically have no security leader, and the elections are coming up. So
Yes.
that's not a great combination for.
I mean, and they
Where
managed to remove
Facebook are.
17 accounts, though, Josh. I mean, that counts for something, right?
Well,
But
Maybe
is that
like
gonna-
half a centimeter of something, but it counts for
Can we
something.
get that number up by tomorrow? So, I don't know.
18.
18.
To make you feel all better, Alexa, play It's Raining Tacos.
Oh, God. That's not where I was going with that, Larry.
The song will make you feel better.
Well, there's two ways to look at it. Finding a needle in the haystack that they were able to identify 17 accounts that were, whatever the threshold was, were bogus or were politically motivated or were fake. There's one side of looking at it where you say, wow, that's really cool that they were able to find them, because the ability to hide amongst a billion accounts is probably pretty significant.
Sure.
Versus the other side where in a billion accounts there could be 100 million accounts that are bogus and they've only found 17. I unfortunately can see things from both sides, and it's very painful.
Yeah, I mean, the only real way to know would be if you were Russia to be able to say, you know, or whomever created those accounts, how valuable were those to the attacker? Like, what were they actually used to do? And that's really
I'm just
the
picturing
metric.
like Bert Kreischer's story about when he was in the Russian mafia, and like they go up, and it's exactly as he describes, where they open the door, someone answers it in a tracksuit and like a wife beater with a gold chain, smoking a cigarette, and they go, Facebook got 17 of our accounts. And he goes, ha, 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 ha. Break out the vodka. We have 17 million accounts.
Well, or
how I
they're
picture
the
it.
17 out of the 500 accounts that they are hoping that we'll find that will
Right.
distract
Right.
and
Sure.
tie up resources.
Out of the
and there's
30,000,
a-
like Kevin
Yeah.
Johnson has.
These are the 17 loudest
Yes.
Yeah.
bots that we have, and we will just spin up some more.
Yep.
Or
Yeah, these are essentially the squirrels.
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 Oh my God.
Wow.
2.23 billion active users on Facebook. I remember back in the day
minus
we talked
17.
about
Minus 17.
minus 17. It's a good point, Josh. Minus 17.
Yeah.
That's weird because I just lost 17 followers on Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah, right? So I just think that's interesting just from a technology perspective when we used to talk about Facebook crossing the 100 million mark,
Yeah.
the 300 million, the 500 million mark, the billion mark. I lost track of it after that, and now they're north.
So what's their current valuation mapped to users? Because you could
A lot
figure out
less than it used to be.
17 users less than what it used to
There
be.
you go.
And
How about that?
119 billion, what? Something like that.
That's like something like half a centimeter less
Yes.
in the
Five,
circumference of the Earth.
yeah, 5 millimeter size. And Paul, one real quick one I wanted to touch on that I thought was an interesting concept, and I can see how this can be sort of sci-fi like for the
How many
future.
centimeters are there in the circumference of the Earth?
Yes. No, and software-defined radio-based cryptocurrency.
Mm.
Effectively, you take an SDR that can support multiple protocols that you put up as a, quote, open access point. And when devices use your open access point to do data communications of some variety, you get credit. And you get cryptocurrency for that.
Interesting.
And
Can I run this on a VGA cable? That's really what I want to know.
maybe. And cryptocurrency, blockchain applied to everything just drives me nuts. But I thought this was kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
why does it drive us nuts? It drives me nuts too, but I don't even understand why it drives me nuts. It
Same.
just drives me nuts.
Same, but I thought this was an actual interesting implementation in that. Think about in 2021 or in 2031, how many devices we're going to possess that have some sort of wireless capability that need access to a wireless network to be able to communicate to other devices to check in or do location or
Like
data
everything.
acquisition, everything.
I don't know why, but I want a smart ring. Like just because I think it's cool that there can be a chipset in my ring.
So
Like,
that when
I think
so
that's
that
cool.
so that like when you get a Twitter notification, your cock ring can buzz.
No, a ring for my ring finger, Larry.
a ring.
No, they make. Have you guys seen these?
No, I haven't.
They make
smart
rings for fingers? What?
Yeah, no,
I mean, yours
And
might be
rings
around
for
the
your-
same size.
your other things. Fortunately, I can get away with just a couple of pinky rings. It's great, but
That's about a half a centimeter, isn't it?
yes, very good reference. We're gonna see how many times we can reference the
couple
centimeter.
couple of 5 millimeter rings, and you got full coverage.
Yes.
Oh,
I don't even know why I tried the whole line. Kevin, why did I go there? Kevin, why?
he should just waff it up and it'd be all set.
Next gen.
Next gen WAF, because it would need to be a next gen WAF for putting blockchain on your Wi-Fi's.
Wow, a blockchain powered WAF. Now we're on it.
He's actually thinking
Someone
about it now.
trademark that, and I want royalties.
He's actually thinking about it now.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, 2.0. I'm already on the 2.0.
Oh,
I'm
boy.
pretty close to next gen.
But either way, I still thought, looking to the future about how we could apply blockchain technology, and this one was pretty interesting in that if they use your stuff, you get credit. Cool. I like money. Use my stuff, I get money. To enable the ability for all these other new technologies, we Blade Runner type stuff. So I thought that was.
I was thinking of Blade Runner 2 for some reason. Because you said in the year 2021, I was thinking 2049, right? Isn't it the Blade Runner 2049?
Was it Blade
okay.
Runner 2 or was it a reboot?
It was a 2.
I refused to watch it.
It was a sequel. I would call it definitely a sequel.
Seen it
A
yet.
late sequel.
Who was in that?
Harrison Ford?
Yeah.
Was Harrison Ford in he was in
He was
both
in the
of them.
original.
Well, he was in the new one too.
I
It
haven't
was
seen
in
it.
the original.
I haven't seen it.
Yes, he was in the new
Daryl
one too.
Hannah in the reboot sequel?
I don't think so. Don't think so.
Moving along, you have our final story for the week.
Yeah, I think we should talk about putting toothpaste on your boobs.
Let's
because
talk about toothpaste.
I had lots of choices for the funny story of the week. I went with this new trend that women are taking to YouTube to show off videos of themselves massaging toothpaste over their boobs in hopes. Now, the article kind of talks about to make them bigger, and it also talks about to kind of tighten them up.
So they don't sag as much.
They're sagging a little, or they're just getting stretchy, and they want to tighten them up, so they're rubbing toothpaste on their boobs.
One of them said it was a petroleum jelly and toothpaste.
That's just bizarre.
I mean, who wants to taste that? Really?
But there's somewhere in here,
Oh,
they talk about... Oh, okay. So consider this. So now we've established that this is the trend.
This
And
is
so
the
your
thing.
next logical
This is
question
the
is,
thing.
does it tighten them up? And does it
do
make them
anything?
bigger,
Does it
right?
work? Does it
So
work?
considering toothpaste is essentially just a mix of alcohol, mint, fluoride, and detergents, i.e. ingredients that have zero ability to grow breast tissue, there is no reason why toothpaste would work. Also, a medical dermatologist says that they cringe at the prospect of putting toothpaste on a zit, let alone lathering it on your breasts. They also state that toothpaste can be an extreme skin irritant, and there's no medical evidence that toothpaste or Vaseline or any topical cream can increase collagen or elastin. Well, that's a really medical terminology sentence, huh? So she also says, this is Mona Gohara, MD. She also says, otherwise, trust me, after baby number 2, I would have been wearing Crest all day long.
wow.
So not only is she smart, she's got a sense of humor too. Like, good for her. That's awesome.
So what
I
you're
like
saying?
it.
So what you're saying? It's fake news by the toothpaste industry to sell more toothpaste.
Yes, Larry. That's
right.
great.
That's right.
Spot on. There was some
That's right.
spot on
That's right.
analysis on that show. That's a shining example of the outstanding analysis we provide.
That's Security Week.
So they just created a bunch of, they have a bunch of YouTubers, getting some influencers, and they just set it up and they do some, some marketing.
And to prove a point and to conduct our own study, we'll have many
You're
tubes
gonna go home and rub toothpaste?
No, we will have many. We will have many tubes of toothpaste available at the pool cabanas at Black Hat and DEF CON.
We will do our own scientific study.
Yes,
yeah.
you can either apply to your boobs or your balls or both.
No.
We are an equal opportunity offender.
No, one of the
Nobody wants
ingredients.
bigger balls.
Hold on.
Well, you might want to tighten them up a little bit, Jeff.
I
if they
just
get
want
too
to
big.
I want to caution people that are going to embark on this journey, because I know some of you that are listening are probably going to be curious. It contains alcohol and mint, and I tell you, if there are two substances that would burn when you put it on your skin, those might be it. Now,
not skin as much as mucous membrane.
I will give you a tip.
Just the tip.
If you go fishing or you're cooking and you're preparing fish, and your hands smell like fish, you can wash them in toothpaste, and it works better than soap to remove the odor from your hands.
Good tip.
Is that a 5 centimeter?
And I don't know if it necessarily removes it or just covers it up.
They also make a bar of soap that's made of stainless steel. That you wash your hands with a stainless steel bar of soap, and it also absorbs all of the smells as well.
Gotcha.
I
Toothpaste
one.
is always readily available in the house, so that's...
Because you're always rubbing it on your breasts.
Now you'll have to get some Crest.
Whatever.
There you go.
There you go.
Surplus.
There you have it. We will be debunking this myth, and Larry's going to report back next week on his very scientific research.
This episode is sponsored by Colgate.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Larry, take us out.
Over and out.